What does a Roman legionnaire look like? Armor, sword, huge shield. This image of a warrior, carved in marble and praised by historians, has become a symbol of Rome's indestructible power. But what if I told you that this has little to do with reality? It was clothing, not just weapons, that transformed an ordinary man into a universal soldier, capable of surviving and winning in any conditions. We will examine each element of this system to understand the secrets of Roman warriors. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the design of a legionnaire's clothing was a direct response to the weapons and tactics of his fiercest enemies, and why the loss of a single piece of equipment could cost the lives of an entire unit. The foundation on which the entire Roman military machine stood was not armor, but footwear. The caliga, a heavy army sandal, was a true engineering masterpiece of its time. It was this sandal that provided Rome's main strategic advantage, the mobility of its legions. The design of the caliga was thought out down to the smallest detail for maximum durability and functionality. It was carved from a single piece of thick oxhide, which minimized the number of seams and weak points. A complex system of straps secured the shoe tightly to the foot, preventing it from shifting during long marches. The most important part of the caliga was its multi-layered sole. It consisted of several layers of leather held together, creating a strong yet flexible base. Dozens of iron spikes with massive caps, known as clavi, were hammered into this sole. These spikes served several critical functions. First, they greatly increased the life of the shoes by protecting the expensive leather from abrasion against rocks and hard ground. Second, they provided the legionnaire with unmatched traction on any surface, from slippery mud to steep slopes. In close combat, the spiked sole became a formidable weapon. A legionnaire who stepped on a fallen enemy delivered a crushing blow with his entire body weight, reinforced by dozens of sharp metal points. This simple action could neutralize the enemy more effectively than a sword strike. The open design of the caliga provided excellent ventilation for the foot. This was vital for preventing fungal diseases and calluses during long marches in hot climates. The legionnaire's feet remained dry and healthy, allowing him to remain combat ready. The production of caligae was industrialized. Each military camp had workshops where shoemakers mass-produced and repaired footwear. Standardization made it possible to quickly supply thousands of soldiers with footwear of the same high quality and reliability. The march of an entire legion wearing caligae had a powerful psychological effect. The rhythmic, loud, and threatening clatter of thousands of spikes on the road could be heard for many kilometers. This sound became the hallmark of the Roman army, instilling fear and awe even before its appearance. Caligae were not just footwear, but a symbol of a soldier's status. They were worn by everyone, from ordinary legionaries to centurions and even the emperor. The famous nickname of Emperor Caligula literally translates as "little boot," which emphasizes the inextricable link between this footwear and the image of a Roman warrior. We would be very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about the role of logistics and standardization in the successes of the Roman army? Write about it in the comments. Hidden beneath all the layers of armor and straps was the most basic element of a legionnaire's clothing: the tunic. At first glance, it seems like a simple item, but its role in the overall equipment system was fundamental. The health, comfort, and ultimately the combat effectiveness of a soldier depended directly on the quality of the tunic. Sheep's wool was the main material used for military tunics. This choice was due to the unique properties of this material. Wool can absorb up to 30% of its own weight in moisture while remaining dry to the touch, which allowed sweat to be wicked away from the body. Even when wet, wool continued to retain heat, which was critical for preventing hypothermia in rainy or cold weather. In addition, wool has natural antibacterial properties, slowing down the growth of bacteria and the appearance of unpleasant odors. This was a huge advantage in conditions where the opportunity to wash clothes was extremely rare. Contrary to popular belief, military tunics were rarely dazzling white. Most often, they were dyed in various shades of red, using an inexpensive and durable dye made from madder root. Red was practical because dirt and small stains were less noticeable on it. The cut of the tunic was ingenious in its simplicity. It consisted of two rectangular pieces of fabric sewn together, with openings for the head and arms. The military tunic was knee-length, which allowed complete freedom of movement when walking, running, and in battle. The tunic was the first and most important layer of protection for a soldier's skin. It prevented chafing from rough leather belts and heavy metal armor. Without this soft padding, a multi-day march in full armor would have been impossible. Depending on the climate and season, legionnaires could wear several tunics at once. 2 or 3 layers of wool created air pockets that functioned like a modern thermal suit. This simple system allowed them to adapt to a wide range of temperatures, from the heat of Judea to the cold of Germany. Although the basic design was uniform, the quality of the tunic could indicate the status of its owner. Centurions and officers could afford tunics made of finer wool or even linen, dyed with more expensive pigments. However, the functionality and cut remained the same for the entire army. The condition of the tunic was an indicator of a soldier's personal discipline. Commanders strictly ensured that clothing was clean and intact. Each legionnaire carried needles and thread for immediate repairs, as any hole could cause chafing or hypothermia. But the tunic was only the first, thinnest layer of protection. In the next chapter, we will discuss a little-known but critically important element that was located between the fabric and the metal, and on which the very possibility of wearing armor in battle depended. Between the tunic and the heavy metal armor was one of the most underrated but vital elements of Roman equipment, the subarmalis. It was a quilted underarm jacket that served as a shock absorber. Without it, even the most durable lorica would be ineffective and even dangerous for its owner. The main task of the subarmalis was to absorb and dissipate the kinetic energy of an impact. Metal armor could stop a sword blade or spear tip, preventing a penetrating wound. However, the force of the blow did not disappear, and without a shock-absorbing pad, it could lead to broken bones, ruptured internal organs, and extensive bruising. The subarmalis was made of several layers of thick linen or felt, which were sewn together. This multi-layered structure created a resilient cushion that dampened vibration and blunt force. It was the direct equivalent of modern body armor with anti-splinter lining. This item of clothing also played an important role in thermoregulation. The metal of the armor quickly heated up in the sun and cooled down instantly in the cold. The subarmalis created an insulating barrier between the soldier's body and the metal, protecting against burns and hypothermia. In addition, the subarmalis protected the body from the armor itself. The hard edges of the metal plates of the lorica segmentata, or the rings of chainmail, could rub the skin raw with constant movement. The soft and thick lining prevented this, ensuring comfort during prolonged wear of the armor. The design of the subarmalis often included special flaps, known as pterygia. These were strips of quilted fabric or leather that hung from the shoulders and hem of the jacket. They provided additional protection for vulnerable areas, such as the shoulder joints and upper thighs. Some models of subarmalis had special pads in the shoulder area. These pads helped distribute the weight of heavy armor and prevented it from slipping. Everything in this seemingly simple jacket was designed for one purpose: to make wearing armor as effective and safe as possible. The materials for the subarmalis were carefully selected. Linen was preferred because of its strength and ability to breathe and wick away moisture. Pressed wool felt provided better cushioning, but was heavier and took longer to dry. Wearing lorica without subarmalis was practically impossible and pointless. It was like having a sturdy helmet without a shock-absorbing lining. It was the subarmalis that transformed Roman armor from simple metal armor into a comprehensive protection system. Although subarmalis is rarely depicted in films and popular illustrations, its existence is confirmed by numerous bas-reliefs and archaeological data. It was a silent, invisible hero that saved countless lives by absorbing the force of blows that metal could not stop. Lorica Roman armor was the pinnacle of metallurgical and engineering technology of its time. It was not just armor, but the legionnaire's steel skin, allowing him to withstand a hail of blows in the thick of battle. There were 3 main types of lorica, each with its own unique advantages and intended for different tactical tasks. The oldest and most common type was lorica hamada, or chainmail. It consisted of thousands of iron rings, each of which was connected to 4 adjacent rings. The manufacturing process was incredibly labor-intensive, as each ring had to be not only bent, but also riveted for maximum strength. The main advantage of chainmail was its flexibility. It did not restrict movement at all, allowing the soldier to bend, run, and fight freely. Lorica hamata provided excellent protection against cutting and slashing blows, which simply slid off the blade. The most famous and technologically advanced armor was the segmentata lorica. It consisted of horizontal iron plates connected by a complex system of leather straps, buckles, and pins. This armor provided better protection against stabbing and crushing blows than chainmail. The design of the lorica segmentata was modular, which made it easy to replace damaged plates in the field. It also distributed weight better across the soldier's body, transferring some of the load from the shoulders to the waist. However, its complex fastening system required constant maintenance and was vulnerable to damage. The third type was lorica squamata, or scale armor. It consisted of hundreds of small metal plates sewn onto a fabric or leather base. This type of armor was particularly effective against blows from above, such as those from horsemen. Lorica squamata was often used by cavalrymen, standard bearers, and officers, as it combined good protection with a striking appearance. The scales glistening in the sun made the warrior look like a mythical creature, which made a strong impression on the enemy. Each type of armor was the result of a long evolution and combat experience. The choice of lorica depended on the era, type of troops, and region of service. Support troops more often wore cheaper and easier to maintain chainmail, while the elite legions during the heyday of the Empire were equipped with segmentata lorica. This diversity allowed for a flexible approach to equipping the army depending on the task at hand. But no matter how strong the armor on the body was, it was useless without protecting the most important part. In the next chapter, we will learn how the Romans protected their heads. Head and body protection were inextricably linked in Roman tactics. The helmet, galea, and shield, scutum, worked in tandem to create an almost impenetrable barrier. This combination was the basis of a legionnaire's survival in close formation. Imagine a modern special forces soldier in full gear, a helmet with face protection, body armor, and a shield. Roman legionnaires achieved a comparable level of protection using technology that is 2,000 years old. If you were standing in a Roman formation before a barbarian attack, you would understand that your life depended on perfect coordination between your helmet and shield. One without the other left you with fatal vulnerabilities. The Roman imperial helmet was the pinnacle of protective technology for its time. Its design was thought out to repel threats from different directions. The hemispherical shape effectively deflected slashing blows, causing the blade to slide to the side. The manufacture of such a helmet required the skill of dozens of craftsmen, from blacksmiths who forged the main bowl to embossing specialists who created decorative elements. Each helmet was tested for strength, and defective samples were ruthlessly discarded. If you received a new helmet, you would feel its perfect balance. The center of gravity was positioned so that your head would not get tired even after wearing it for many hours. The key elements of the helmet were a wide neck guard and massive cheek guards. The neck guard protected the neck from blows from behind, which was a common tactic of Rome's enemies. The cheek guards, in turn, covered the face, leaving only the eyes, nose, and mouth exposed. The design of the cheek guards was particularly complex. They had to provide maximum protection without restricting the warrior's vision or breathing. Special hinges allowed their position to be adjusted depending on the situation. Imagine the feeling of complete protection when your face is covered with armor, but you still have the ability to see the battlefield clearly and give commands to your comrades. There was often an additional reinforcing visor above the forehead of the helmet. It was designed to stop a slashing blow aimed at the face. This detail was a direct response to the tactics of the Dacians, who used curved swords to attack over shields. The helmet had a leather or felt lining inside. It not only made it comfortable to wear, but also served as a shock absorber, softening the force of the blow. Without it, even an unbroken helmet could cause serious concussion. The quality of the lining determined whether a warrior could fight effectively throughout the day or would suffer head injuries from his own helmet. The best linings were made from specially treated sheepskin with the addition of horsehair for extra cushioning. If you wore such a helmet on a hot day, you would appreciate the importance of ventilation holes and the absorbent properties of the lining. The scutum, a large rectangular shield, was the Legionnaires' mobile wall. It was made of 3 layers of glued wooden slats, covered with leather, and had a metal rim. This design was both durable and relatively lightweight. The technology used to make the scutum resembled the modern production of layered composite materials. Each layer of wood was positioned perpendicular to the previous one, which gave the shield exceptional strength when bent. The total weight of the shield was about 10 kilograms, which required excellent physical training from the Legionnaire. Imagine the strain on the left arm during many hours of battle. It was a serious test of endurance. The convex shape of the shield allowed it to effectively deflect blows and projectiles. In the center of the scutum was an umbo, a massive metal hemisphere. It not only protected the hand holding the shield, but was also a weapon that could be used to deliver a powerful blow to the enemy's face. The size of the scutum allowed the Legionnaire to cover his body from chin to knees. In close formation, the shields of neighboring warriors overlapped each other, creating a solid wall. It was from behind this wall that the Legionnaires delivered short stabbing blows with their gladiuses. The technique of working with a scutum in formation required constant training and flawless coordination with comrades. The slightest gap in the shield wall could be fatal for the entire unit. If you were standing in the front row of the Roman formation, you would feel your neighbor's shields touching yours, creating a feeling of an impregnable fortress from which you could safely attack the enemy. The pinnacle of the tactical use of the scutum was the formation of the tortoise, renitestudo. Soldiers closed their shields on all sides and above, turning the unit into an armored box. In this formation, Legionnaires could safely approach the walls of enemy fortresses under a hail of arrows and stones. Executing the testudo required exceptional discipline and coordination. Each soldier had to know his place exactly and move in sync with the others. The soldiers in the center raised their shields above their heads, creating a roof, while those on the edges held their shields outwards, forming walls. Imagine the feeling of being inside such a living fortress. Arrows whistling and stones flying outside, but you feel completely safe under the reliable protection of your comrades' shields. Thus, the helmet and shield were not separate elements of protection. They formed a single system that allowed the Legionnaire to survive the fiercest battles. This system had been honed over centuries of combat and was one of the main secrets of Roman victories. The military belt, or cingulum, was not just a detail for holding clothes or carrying weapons. It was an important status symbol that distinguished a soldier from a civilian. Its appearance and design indicated that its owner belonged to the most powerful army in the world. Imagine modern insignia, epaulets, stripes, emblems, that instantly identify a military person in a crowd of civilians. The Roman cingulum served a similar function, but was a much more noticeable and impressive element. If you met a legionnaire on the streets of a Roman city, the first thing that would catch your eye would be this richly decorated belt, which unmistakably identified the wearer as a member of the military caste. The cingulum consisted of a thick leather belt richly decorated with metal plates. These plates not only served as decoration, but also gave the belt additional strength. The higher the rank of the warrior, the more richly decorated his belt could be. The manufacture of a high-quality cingulum required the skills of several craftsmen, a leather worker who worked with the base, a metallurgist who created decorative elements, and an engraving specialist. The most luxurious examples could cost as much as several months' salary for a simple legionnaire. If you were a centurion, your belt would serve not only as a functional item, but also as an investment in your reputation. Your subordinates would immediately understand who they were dealing with by looking at the quality and richness of the decorations. The most noticeable part of the cingulum was the so-called apron. It consisted of several leather straps hanging down in front. Each strap was covered with metal plates and ended with a heavy pendant. When walking, these elements made a loud and distinctive clanking sound. When an entire legion marched, this sound merged into a single hum, which served as a means of psychological pressure. It was the sound of approaching war, recognizable and terrifying. Imagine the silence of an ancient forest suddenly broken by a rhythmic metallic clang coming from afar. This sound meant only one thing. The Roman army was approaching. Rome's enemies quickly learned to recognize this ominous clang and knew that they had very little time to prepare for battle or flee. The psychological effect was so strong that many tribes surrendered upon hearing the distinctive sound of the Roman formation. In addition to its symbolic and psychological function, the apron provided some protection for the groin area. Although it could not stop a direct blow, it could deflect or weaken a slashing sword strike. It was an additional, albeit limited, line of defense. On the right side of the belt was attached the scabbard of the gladius, the legionnaire's short sword. The sturdy construction of the cingulum ensured that the weapon was securely fastened and quickly accessible. The belt was an integral part of the weapon carrying system. The sword was placed on the right side for a reason. It allowed the legionnaire to quickly draw the weapon with his right hand without interfering with the movements of the shield in his left hand. The scabbard had a special design that held the sword in place while running and jumping, but allowed it to be drawn instantly when necessary. If you had fought in the Roman army, you would have understood the importance of this seemingly simple detail. In a critical moment of battle, seconds decide the outcome of the fight. On the left side of the belt hung the pugio, the legionnaire's dagger. It was not only a weapon of last resort in close combat, but also a universal tool. It was used for household needs in the camp, from cutting food to minor repairs of equipment. The pugio blade was wide, leaf-shaped, and ideal for delivering powerful stabbing blows. It was capable of piercing even chainmail or leather armor. The presence of this weapon gave the soldier additional confidence in battle. The geometry of the pugio blade was the result of centuries of evolution of cold weapons. The wide base provided maximum striking power, and the pointed tip easily penetrated the enemy's armor. Unlike the gladius, which was designed for use in formation, the pugio was the personal weapon of each soldier. Imagine a situation where your main sword is broken or lost, and the enemy is already close. At that moment, the pugio became the last hope for salvation. The pugio's hilt and scabbard were often richly decorated. Archaeologists have found examples inlaid with silver and enamel. This suggests that the dagger was also a source of personal pride for the soldier. Thus, the belt and dagger were not just accessories. The cingulum determined the status of a warrior and played a role in psychological warfare. The pugio was both a formidable weapon and an indispensable tool, completing the image of a legionnaire. The main enemy of any army is often not the opponent, but the climate and disease. The Romans, whose empire stretched from hot deserts to cold forests, understood this perfectly well. Therefore, a legionnaire's equipment included items specifically designed to protect against inclement weather. Imagine a modern soldier equipped with high-tech gear featuring thermoregulation, waterproof membranes, and synthetic insulation. Roman legionnaires achieved a comparable level of protection from the elements using only natural materials and centuries of experience. If you served in the legion, you would quickly realize that your life depended not only on your sword and shield, but also on the quality of your cloak and a properly tied scarf. A key element was the military cloak, the sagum. It was made from a single large rectangular piece of thick, dense wool. This item, simple at first glance, was a universal survival tool. The dimensions of the sagum were carefully calculated. It had to completely cover the soldier from head to knees, but at the same time not interfere with movement in battle. The quality of the wool varied depending on the status of the legionnaire and the climatic conditions of the region where he served. If you received your first sagum, you would be surprised by its weight. A good cloak could weigh up to 3 kilograms, but that was the price for reliable protection from the weather. The wool for the sagum was treated with lanolin, a natural sheep fat. This made the fabric virtually waterproof. During heavy rain or snowfall, the cloak reliably protected the soldier and his equipment from getting wet, preventing hypothermia. The process of treating the fabric with lanolin was a real art. The fat had to be evenly distributed over the entire surface of the fabric without compromising its breathability. Modern membrane fabrics work on similar principles, but the Romans achieved this effect using only natural means. Imagine the feeling of complete dryness under such a cloak during heavy rain, when water simply rolls off the fabric without penetrating it. At night, the sagum turned into a warm blanket. Legionnaires often slept under the open sky, and this cloak was their only protection from the night cold. The ability to rest properly and regain strength was critical to maintaining combat readiness. The technique of using the sagum as a blanket was passed down from veterans to recruits and included many tricks for maximum heat retention. Experienced legionnaires knew how to wrap themselves in the cloak to create air pockets that acted as additional insulation. If you spent a cold night under such a cloak, you would understand that high-quality wool can keep you as warm as a modern sleeping bag. The cloak could also be used as an improvised shield. Wrapped around the left arm, it could soften or even stop a sword blow. In a critical situation, such a simple tactic could save a life. Another important element was the scarf, or focale. It was a strip of wool or linen fabric that was tied around the neck. Its main function was to protect the skin from rubbing against the hard edges of armor and helmets. The focale was not just a utilitarian item, but also an element of military fashion. Its color and the way it was tied could indicate a soldier's rank or his affiliation with a particular unit. A high-quality focale was made of soft fabric with a special weave that ensured maximum moisture absorption. If you wore heavy Roman armor, you would quickly appreciate the importance of this small piece of equipment. Constant friction of metal against the neck could lead to serious wounds, which could easily become infected in field conditions. The focale created a soft barrier, preventing this danger. In addition, it absorbed sweat, increasing comfort and hygiene. In northern provinces such as Britain and Germany, legionaries wore trousers or bracha. Initially considered barbaric clothing, they were adopted for purely practical reasons. Woolen trousers were indispensable for protection against cold and moisture. The adoption of barbaric clothing was a striking example of Roman pragmatism. Tradition and prejudice gave way to practical necessity. Roman brachia differed from Germanic trousers in that they were more tightly cut and had reinforced seams, adapted to the needs of the legionary. Imagine the psychological discomfort of a Roman soldier who first puts on the clothes of his recent enemies, but quickly realizes their advantages in the harsh northern climate. The Romans also used woolen socks called eudones in cold climates. They were worn under caligae to keep the feet warm. This simple innovation significantly increased the legion's ability to operate in harsh winter conditions. Frostbite of the feet was one of the main reasons for the loss of combat effectiveness in northern campaigns. So the advent of warm socks was a real revolution in military affairs. Eudones were knitted from specially treated wool with the addition of animal fat for extra water resistance. If you had to march for days through snow-covered Britain, you would understand that warm socks can be more important than the most expensive weapons. This system of clothing for inclement weather demonstrates the pragmatism of the Romans. They were willing to borrow and adapt any useful technology, even if it came from their enemies. The main goal was always to maximize the effectiveness and survivability of the soldier. The effectiveness of Roman military equipment depended not only on its design, but also on a complex system of logistics and maintenance. The army was a self-sufficient organism, capable of maintaining its combat readiness far from home. This was achieved through standardization and the presence of skilled specialists in each legion. Imagine a modern military base in a remote region. It has workshops, spare parts warehouses, skilled technicians, and clear standards for equipment maintenance. The Roman legions created a similar system 2,000 years ago, but without modern technology and transportation. If you commanded a legion in Britain or Germany, you would understand that the success of a campaign depends not only on the bravery of the soldiers, but also on how quickly armor can be repaired or broken weapons replaced. The Fabri, the legion's engineers and craftsmen, played a key role. These were soldiers skilled as blacksmiths, carpenters, shoemakers, and armorers. They were responsible for the maintenance of everything from sandals to siege engines. The Fabri were an elite unit. They were not just craftsmen in military uniform, but versatile specialists capable of solving any technical problem in the field. Their training lasted for years and included not only the mastery of crafts, but also the study of military tactics. If you served as a Farbr, you would be proud of your status. These people were indispensable and enjoyed special respect among the legionnaires. Full-fledged workshops were set up in every permanent or temporary camp. Here, damaged armor was repaired, worn-out straps on segmentata lorica were replaced, and broken rings and chainmail were replaced. The presence of such workshops made it possible to quickly return equipment to service. The mobile workshops of the Roman legions resembled modern field hospitals. They could be set up in a few hours anywhere the legion stopped. Dozens of specialists worked in these workshops, each responsible for a specific type of equipment. Imagine the coordinated work of this military-industrial complex in miniature. While some repair armor, others sharpen swords, and still others repair shoes, all of this taking place in a few tents in the middle of barbarian lands. Standardization was the basis of this system. Plates for segmentada lorica, spikes for caligae, and helmet parts were all made to a single design. This meant that a damaged part could easily be replaced with a new one from the warehouse, without the need for individual fitting. Each legionnaire also possessed basic repair skills. He had to be able to repair his tunic, replace the strap on his caliga, or sharpen his sword. A minimum set of tools and materials for minor repairs was always kept in the campaign bag. The self-service system was a vital part of Roman military culture. Each soldier was not only a warrior, but also a technician responsible for maintaining his own equipment. This was taught from the first days of service, and the skills were passed on from veterans to recruits. If you were a legionnaire, you would spend every evening in camp caring for your equipment, cleaning your armor, lubricating your leather straps, and checking the sharpness of your sword. Supplying the army was a complex logistical operation. Leather for shoes and belts, iron for weapons and armor, fabric for clothing, all of this was delivered to the active army in a centralized manner. The Roman road network played a key role in ensuring these supplies. Roman quartermasters kept precise records of each legion's needs and planned supplies months in advance. Wagons carrying materials stretched for kilometers and required powerful protection from enemy attacks. Imagine the scale of this operation. A single legion required tons of iron, hundreds of hides for leather goods, and kilometers of fabric for tunics and cloaks. The wear and tear on equipment was enormous. A single pair of caligae could become unusable in a few months during active campaigning. A legion of 5,000 men required tens of thousands of pairs of shoes per year, which placed a huge strain on the production and logistics system. Special attention was paid to the care of weapons and armor to prevent rust. Metal parts were regularly cleaned with sand and lubricated with oil or animal fat. This routine procedure was part of the legionnaire's daily discipline. Combating corrosion was a constant concern for every soldier. The humid climate of the northern provinces or the salty air of the coastal areas quickly rendered metal unusable. Legionnaires developed effective methods of protection, using different oils and fats depending on climatic conditions. If you served in Britain, you would know that neglecting daily weapon maintenance could cost you your life at a critical moment in battle. Thus, behind the shine of Roman weapons lay a huge and invisible effort to keep them in fighting condition. Without this well-oiled system of repair and supply, even the most sophisticated equipment would quickly become unusable. It was this invisible side of war that largely ensured Rome's long-term success. Roman military equipment was not just a set of functional items. It was a powerful psychological tool that transformed a crowd of recruits into a single, monolithic organism, a legion. Uniforms erased individual differences and created a new collective identity. Absolute uniformity in appearance played a key role. When a soldier saw thousands of people around him dressed and armed exactly like him, it created an incredible sense of unity and strength. He ceased to be just a farmer from Gaul or a townsman from Italy. He became part of something much bigger. This uniformity also had a strong, demoralizing effect on the enemy. The sight of thousands of identical, faceless warriors moving in perfect formation created the impression of a clash not with people, but with a ruthless force of nature. This undermined the enemy's morale even before the battle began. Every piece of equipment was a source of pride. A richly decorated belt, a shiny helmet, well-maintained armor. All these were signs of belonging to the elite, to the citizens of Rome who carried civilization at the tip of their swords. This pride in their equipment grew into pride in their legion and in the entire empire. The reward system was also closely linked to equipment. For bravery, soldiers could receive phalae, large silver discs that were attached to a special leather strap over the armor. Wearing these awards was a great honor and served as an example to others. Even the sound of the Roman army was part of its psychological weaponry. The rhythmic clang of caligae, the ringing of cingulum, the dull thud of scutum. All this merged into a single symphony of war, recognizable and terrifying. This sound was associated with the inevitable approach of Roman order. Clothing clearly separated soldiers from the civilian world. Off-duty and in peaceful cities, wearing full armor was prohibited. This emphasized the special status of the army as an instrument of the state, separate from everyday life. The process of receiving equipment was an important ritual for a recruit. Donning a tunic, caligae, and lorica symbolized his transition to a new status, his birth as a soldier. From that moment on, his life was subject to strict discipline and regulations. Thus, the Roman uniform was not just clothing. It shaped the soldier's consciousness, strengthened discipline, created a corporate spirit, and instilled fear in enemies. It was an instrument of control and ideology, no less important than the gladius or pilum. Having examined each element separately, we come to the main conclusion. The strength of Roman equipment lay not in any single miracle weapon, but in its systematic nature. Each item was part of a unified, perfectly balanced complex, where all elements worked together, complementing and reinforcing each other. It was a triumph of engineering and tactical thinking. The system was built on the principle of multi-layered protection. The woolen tunic warded off moisture, the quilted subormalis cushioned blows, and the outer lorica stopped blades. None of these layers would have been as effective on their own, but together they created an almost impenetrable defense. The mobility provided by the caligae was the foundation of the entire strategy. Without the ability to quickly and efficiently move huge armies over long distances, all the power of Roman weapons and armor would have been useless. It was the footwear that allowed this power to be delivered to the right place at the right time. Protection was distributed across the body according to combat tactics. The helmet protected against blows from above, aimed over the shield. The scutum covered most of the body from frontal attacks, and the lorica protected the torso in close combat when it was inconvenient to use a shield. Offensive and defensive functions were perfectly balanced. The legionnaire was protected just enough so that it did not prevent him from attacking effectively. The weight and design of the equipment were a compromise between maximum protection and the mobility necessary for combat. This system was versatile and adaptable. The same set of equipment allowed the legionnaire to march, build a fortified camp, conduct a siege, and fight in open terrain. By adding or removing elements such as a cloak or trousers, the soldier could adapt to any climatic conditions. Standardization and maintainability ensured the long-term effectiveness of this system. The ability to quickly repair or replace any item in the field made the Roman army much more resilient in long campaigns than the armies of its enemies, where equipment was often individual and unique. The psychological aspect was an integral part of the system. The appearance, sound, and uniformity of Roman equipment were as much a weapon as the sword. They broke the will of the enemy and strengthened the spirit of the legionaries themselves. Thus, the Roman legionnaire was not just a warrior, but an operator of a complex weapon system. Every element of this system, from the spikes on the sandals to the crest on the helmet, was in its place and performed its irreplaceable function. It was this systematic approach and attention to detail that allowed Rome to create the most effective army of the ancient world. We have taken a journey into the world of the Roman legionnaire, but we have looked at it from an unusual angle. We saw how everyday items of clothing, sandals, tunics, cloaks, were transformed by the Romans into effective tools of war and survival. A soldier's equipment was not a random collection of items, but an ingenious system honed by centuries of combat experience. This system proves that there are no trifles in war. The Romans understood this better than anyone else, creating a soldier who was protected not only by metal, but also by the technology incorporated into his clothing. From the ability of their shoes to withstand marches of many kilometers, to the ability of their cloaks to protect them from freezing rain, everything worked toward one great goal: victory. What would you like to learn about in future episodes? Perhaps you are interested in the daily life of Roman cities, the secrets of aqueduct construction, or naval battle tactics. Suggest your topics in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next journeys into history.